One. And here we are. It's a blustery Sunday where I am as I look out of a sunroom. Very fortunate to be sitting out on Lake Winnipeg looking at the waves rolling in and whitecaps crashing. And we are here with the Roundup with obviously Curt Wyatt, and back again for a third appearance is Sonia Johannson. So thanks for coming in, Sonia, on short notice to discuss some things.
Pleasure to be here, Pete.
Right on. How's your day going, Curt?
No complaints. We're watching the bad weather here in Winnipeg as well, Pete. So you're not avoiding or getting any extra by being where you are. That's for sure. But hey, we needed some rain. That's for sure. Things were pretty dry.
Some rain. So I guess the world has turned upside down again in the last week, and here we are sitting, in our homes and stuff, but across the United States, and protests, violence, and everything else that comes along with it around the death of George Floyd. But a major change is happening. There is an awareness level out there that is taking the United States, it's coming across Canada. We are having positive rallies for under the Black Lives Matter moniker and direction across Canada, and they're obviously across the United States. And I think it's important to talk about inclusion and how the world has changed for businesses, because there's no going back anymore with this. The awareness level has to be there for businesses. And as we were saying before we went live, insurance has traditionally been a bit of an older white business. And that's changing. And there are things people need to know about how this is changing. And Sonia, you are an HR professional. You understand this. Where do we start as business owners, large and small, to make sure we're addressing what the public is demanding right
now? Pete, you mentioned awareness. It's more than awareness at this point. It's action. There's been a lot of stepping back, watching, not being a participant, but at this point, it's not good enough to just sit back and watch. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, and businesses are expected not to remain silent. If you're an ally, you're going to be making strides to correcting things. So, and then the second thing I would say that businesses would need to do is exactly that, just taking action and looking at your policies, looking at what the demographic of your people looks like, and does that reflect diversity? Because they're looking for, people in general, and the Black community and people of color are looking for representation in the companies that they work with, and allies in anti-racism.
Sonia, growing up in central Canada here, we're in Winnipeg, and the neighborhood for the most part had some diversity, but not a lot. And I think it started to change in our generation, I would say, that we started to see more people coming from different countries and joining us here in Winnipeg. Winnipeg, unlike Toronto, wasn't sort of seen as a place to come to originally. Toronto, places, big, larger cities seem to catch a lot of new Canadians first, and then they seem to work their way to Canada. And I think that's a bit of a general statement. I think we've got, obviously families sponsor other families, and that starts to change things. When you see that opportunity come into play, and as it relates to the business world that we deal in, which was insurance, that also seemed to create, call it an opportunity to make that change happen, because of the fact that you actually had neighborhoods where you could present an opportunity to new Canadians. And where can business owners look at that as something that's a positive for their overall team of people that they're working with?
In terms of the diversity of that?
Yeah, because neighborhoods are changing. When we were growing up as a kid, and I think you could relate to this, and I think you were out in Springfield, probably in class, you were one of two Black people, and the other Black person.
The only one.
Well, the other black person was your brother, Paul. So, right. So, that then it wasn't a case of the, Oak Bank Insurance Office saying, hey, we got a large community of people moving here from Jamaica. We should really think about having some Jamaicans working at our office so that when people come in, we can all dialogue together. Where now in a lot of cities, you are seeing larger communities made up of people from other countries. And I think it's terrific. How do you as a business owner sort of take that opportunity? Is it just simply bringing some staff in, doing some interviews? Like what was the process, some of the processes you used to sort of bring that attention to management that, things are looking pretty white here in your office. Let's get recognizing that the outside the doors of the office, the neighborhood was changing is where I was going.
Well, I definitely remember having those conversations with you and the rest of the team. It's a reality. We have areas of our city and other cities in the country that have larger populations of people coming in from other countries. And those people want to be able to come in and speak to somebody who speaks their language. They want to be able to come in and speak to somebody who understands their culture, because sometimes those cultural differences make a huge difference in the communication of insurance. So it's really important to start, looking at who you're hiring, looking at resumes. I know there's some statistics out there that say that resumes that have an ethnic looking name next to the identical resume that has a Western name gets half the looks, identical resume. So I think recognizing some of the biases that are around our hiring practices that we may not even be aware of, looking at our communities and understanding what the makeup of the communities are and looking for representation for those people in your business. And supporting them, because a lot of times those people come with, situations where their language isn't quite, their English isn't as good as yours or mine. We do need people to be able to speak English. I mean, that is definitely a requirement. But at the end of the day, if you have somebody who has maybe a little less English, has the language you want, make sure you're supporting them. They're a good fit. Of course, you're always looking for a good fit for your company. You're not just hiring anybody just because they're a certain color, but a support system for that person is very important.
Sonia, one of the things that companies really focus on right now are the idea of core values, what you push outwards as what you want your team to convey to customers and convey with each other. And how is the movement with Black Lives Matter going to affect people's personal views in alignment with company views? And should insurance brokerage owners sort of readjust when they have an ethnically diverse staff of what their core values are to make sure it's aligning with their staff? Because everyone's feeling empowered right now to push change, and it's necessary that we do make change. And we can see in the world that it's not balanced. There is no equality right now. Mm-hmm. And that's what everyone is screaming for. Do we need to adjust our core values to align with what we're hearing outside of our business walls?
I think so, definitely. Your core values, your mission, your vision, that all speaks to your brand and your culture of your company. So, these things, I originally said, have to permeate through everything. And it starts with those statements that you make. If you want to attract people of color, if you want to attract a diverse workforce, you have to be inclusive. You have to show that you're an inclusive company. You don't stand for any kind of racism. You have policies surrounding that. The policy, having that in your employee manual where everybody can read it and understand what your stances are on these things. Diversity and inclusion is something I think that every company now has to make sure that they're putting out there to the public. And that permeates. Now your brand will start to reflect that. Your culture will start to reflect that. And you know, that's where you'll start to see, you know, maybe being able to attract more of a diverse workforce to yourself, to your company.
I know that's one of the things, Sonia, when we worked together, you did a great job of, you know, not just saying that it's, you know, let's take action and do this. So it wasn't just the steps of, you know, showing it to your team that you were doing it, but I think it was actually building it into, like Pete said, into the culture of the company and making people see that even if in a month or a year or 2 years, whatever the period of time was, that something drastically didn't change. Like all of a sudden we just didn't come out and, you know, all of a sudden, oh, look at all these new employees and they're, you know, different colors than what we had before in the office. But it was that the essence of what the company stood for started to mean that this organization was inclusive. And, you know, Pete, I think you're right on the money. I think companies need to start internalizing it with their own teams first. And it isn't just, you know, because you know, you don't want to create a them and us either, where all of a sudden it's like you know, this old adage of, you know, unless somebody's of a you know, the typical stereotypical story of a, you know, single black mom who applies for a job and gets it before the, you know, the white married guy. You know, you don't want to start that type of stuff in your office, because those stories do get in the lunchroom, and you know, you got to deal with the overall feeling of people. But if that feeling of people becomes, I don't care who gets the job as long as they're the best candidate, and I don't sit back and create, like Sonia, you've said, biases towards those examples I just gave about the mom who's black or what have you. You don't look at her, you don't judge her for those things first. Rather, you judge the fact that she was the best candidate. And I think that's the tough part. Like, how do we get people taking away those first two things before they look at her for who she is? Yeah. And I think when I see these rallies and stuff, to me, what means a lot is that people are standing up and saying, we got to change that within ourselves and just look at people for who they are. And, you know, I was very fortunate to have an upbringing where I think we weren't taught those biases at a young age. We learn them obviously in our community and around us, and our kids will hopefully learn less of them. But they exist, and I think it's culture. It's the core values, Pete. I think that's the term you used, wasn't it?
Yeah, core values.
Yeah.
There's so many angles to take in this, and the one I've come back to a little bit is, and I think where we're going to see pressure points for all businesses, and I know we talk specifically to the insurance business and such, but all small businesses and medium-sized too, and larger as well. I think management and ownership is going to be challenged on a lot of fronts, because what happens if you have some team members or employees who take a little more radical stand, and they are bringing that approach into the workplace, or they're bringing it in with social media? How do we find balance with that, about allowing people to have their beliefs and stuff, so you are not holding it against them because you think it might hurt your business, like their personal beliefs, how that crossover? We deal with that in all sorts of things in a business place, but this is going to be front and center, right, Sonia? How can people navigate that it's not a contradiction, or maybe it's a dichotomy of the personal beliefs in and out of the business office? Like, we have our core values, but what about the one-on-one time and how people talk in the office, and maybe they bring it towards the customers too? There's no clear path here.
No, there really isn't. And, you know, we have to make sure that we're listening to those people and understanding them and hearing them, because that's what they want. They need to be heard. Some people have some very strong feelings right now, and I can attest to that. It's a tough time. We're all very emotional about this right now. But listening, understanding, every business probably, I'm sure, has a code of conduct, and that at the end of the day has to prevail. You can't, in terms of, you know, your social media platform and that sort of thing. People will be speaking out to their employers. I, for one, have encouraged people, if you see things that you don't think are right, that are maybe a systemic or a rule that seems to hold people back, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, speak up, because that's what's going to make the change. Speak up, tell your employer, have those conversations. And I think the employer's role in this is to listen and to be understanding and truly want to make some sort of change, because they are saying these things because it is a thing.
Yeah, it is a
right.
thing. There's no denying that what people are speaking out about is happening, and in ways that most of us with white skin have no understanding about. I've lived an absolutely privileged life simply because where I was born and and my parents being white and WASPs. I mean, that's given me an advantage. I have to admit it. I have to say it. And I don't say it necessarily with shame, but I say it as a reality statement. That's just that's what I have to hear now from people who can say, you had it better than me. And I go, oh no, my mom was a single mom. It doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the base reality that you were privileged simply because the color of your skin and the time you grew up in. And that's, I think, got to be heard. And I don't know how anymore, how else to say it. I was at the rally in Winnipeg on Friday. My son wanted to go down. His friends are, a wonderful melting pot of ethnicity, and he felt he should be there for his friends who families were coming there. Two of his best friends are from Nigeria, and he wanted to be there for his friends who were going, and this really mattered to them. And he got to see a sort of first taste of activism as a 15-year-old of what this was. Happy to support, happy to go there and help him provide context and see the signs and see the messages. And it's, I think he had a bit of a realization. I'm pretty lucky. And
I think our kids, Pete, are lucky in the sense that, I think we were trying to do a better job in our generation. I don't think we did a great job, but some of us were trying to do a better job or have tried, I should say. And fortunately, our kids are hearing that from us. And, Sonia, do you think that there is a bit of, obviously, I mean, how much time, what's the timeline to this? Because we're talking generations now, and Pete's referring to his kids. And I know you were out there, Sonia, with your family, and
I was.
It's almost like at some point though, is this the springboard? Finally, it's they were clawing away at this, and it was slightly getting better. Maybe you could say, you probably have a lot of examples of your working days coming into business that you felt that things weren't in balance, and let's hope this really does catapult that versus seeing this slow progression to a better system of inclusion.
Yeah. The teaching of our kids is huge. They are the ones who are going to be the future and are going to be leading in the future. And they have to understand that, this is a really big deal right now. My kids, their eyes were open to this. I have a 14 and a 16-year-old, and, it was my first rally also. So it was a bit of an eye opener to see the support and the people in our city who don't agree with what's going on and are outraged, and we should be. When it comes to racism, it really is individual. In many places, like in the United States, it's become systemic because of such a widespread cultural acceptance of what's happening there and how it's always been. It does go back generations. Curt, you were saying, how far does this go? It's from the beginning of, our country starting, basically, and how people have been treated over that time. In Canada here, we have our own issues. Yeah. It's not necessarily just, the Black people, but, it's a big thing. It starts with the individual, though. I see it as starting with the individual. We all have our biases, and we have biases that have with us because of our upbringing, as we've learned, the things we've experienced as people along the way in our jobs. And those biases start to permeate into, as they pertain to people, can be dangerous, because now it starts to shape how you treat certain people without knowing who they are or what they're about.
That's exactly it.
Around your biases is probably like the first thing that you need to look at as a leader in your company, as an employee in your company, as a person in your community. Look at your decisions, why you make the decisions you do, and question the reasons that you make decisions. So I'll give an example. You're hiring some people, you've got people sitting out in your waiting room for interviews. You're looking at how professionally these people look. Of course, we want to project a professional image in our businesses. What is your criteria for a professional look? Someone coming in for an interview in jeans, to me, is not professional. But is the reason that you find somebody not professional because they have dreadlocks, because their hair is in, the dreadlock style? That's not acceptable. And those are the little things that we look at, the little quick decisions we make. They call them microaggressions that people don't even realize are something that they're making their decisions on. So question yourself, question your decisions, question your, just take a good look inward. And, I think if companies also provide training to their people around that kind of introspection, and that's the basis of diversity and inclusion training, is to look at your own biases and understand what they are before you can move forward to be better.
So on that topic, Sonia, about training, and I'm so grateful that you touched on that. You have a family member who's in the police force, and this has become a big portion of what's going on, and we're hearing about this. Does that training exist already? I know it doesn't really exist a whole lot in small businesses. I'm thinking some may do it if they're very forward thinking. I think your example, let's hope our listeners take that and do something about it. First off, let's take up that point there and really highlight that one. I think that's a great tip to the insurance industry. As it relates to our law enforcement industry, does that exist? Is there training like that already in place that is trying to, and I know we can only speak to what we know, which is here in Winnipeg and Canada. We can't speak to our friends in the States and what their fellow people do in their, police force or any of their industries like that, whether it be fire or ambulance or what have you. Do you know what the situation is as it relates to that? Just curious. Yeah,
good question. My brother is a Winnipeg police officer. I also have numerous friends who are on the police force. Some of them are people of color, Black people. And, from what I've just heard and in talking with them, there is some training, I think, that's given around, tolerance, compassion, that sort of thing, like having awareness around certain ethnic groups. So Aboriginal awareness and that kind of thing. I think that the police are starting to, I'm not sure if that happens in the States at all, but in relation to the Winnipeg Police Force, that is something that I believe there is some training around that. In general, in workplaces, I think that's probably one of the last things you're going to see. As a training topic in, if companies are bringing in a trainer to do training, that's probably not what you're gonna see as the training offered for around diversity, inclusion. And honestly, I think that's gonna become more and more important here as we go forward. We wanna educate ourselves. We wanna make sure that people are understanding what's expected of them and what's not expected of them, what's going to be unacceptable. And, I would love to help any company that wants to personally, to offer something like that to their staff members, to develop something that around that in terms of training, whether it's seminars or, a day's worth of training, because we have to start changing how people think about this. And if companies are starting to offer this to their employees, it'll start to permeate, and that's what we need.
Well, I know a guy, Sonia, who has spent some time at the Insurance Council, so he may be able to help you get set up with getting a course like that recognized. Because right now, if I was to go out and look for continuing education credits, sort of course that would give me education credits in our industry that describe what you just described, it doesn't exist.
It's not there.
Yeah, that's true.
Prove me wrong, but it's not there. Okay.
Yeah.
So like if we take something from this today, I'd say that's a big one. And Pete, maybe just find a way to somehow help Sonia get that fast track through, because I think that's important. Yeah.
I think that's the one thing we can kind of wrap here with as we sort of hit our time limit. But Sonia, I think your point of we all have to look inward is super important. But right now, in the last 2 months, we've talked about insurance brokers and anyone in the insurance industry pivoting to provide solutions to the change from COVID. Well, we're going to be doing another pivot. And the pivot is to have inclusivity, diversity, and sensitivity to the underlying, and we have to say it, systemic issues of racism in our society in the workplace. And now is your time to pivot and be a leader. You want to lead selling, you're going to lead by selling you're going to sell a heck of a lot more if you adopt what Sonia's talked about in terms of your business core values and training people to be better when it comes to this stuff. We want to make everyone who walks in our door feel welcome. We want to make all our team members feel welcome. We probably haven't done the best job of it, and now we have to be aware of it. So Sonia, thanks again for coming on, talking about.
And Pete,
this.
I'm just going to add one more thing
important
to that. Yeah, and just to add one more thing to that before we let Sonia close is, if there's one good thing that's come from COVID here, and there's probably been a few, but one of them is it's given us, and it was my daughter who said this, it's given us the time to reflect. And if that reflection time of who we are and what our values are has come from, if this is what's come from, is it one of the items that's come from that self-reflection, then, and that's somehow behind all of us getting together here and saying this has to change, then,
it's a great thing.
COVID's not a bad thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe staying home for 90 days wasn't a bad thing if it meant looking at a mirror and realizing the things, your values, as Pete put earlier. So
Yeah.
Sonia, again, thanks so much for coming on. Please close with a couple of words here, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah, no, I, as always, enjoy sitting and talking with you guys. It's always a great conversation. Take action. That's all I have to say. There's a few different ways you can do that. You can support the community, the Black community, people of color, businesses, donating to causes that are anti-racism. Anti-racism is really what we are about here. And you can't stay silent anymore. It's very important to have a stance. If you are a company that's sort of standing back and not saying anything, you will be called out on that. I've seen it already many times. Social media is a wonderful and a scary thing at times. And if you are silent, it will be noticed. So that's, in closing, what it is. And take a look within, because that is where it all starts.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sonia. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks again, guys. Take care.